of our last video on Prince Caspian, I mentioned that there was two final things I wanted to look at. One of those being the character of Lily Gloves, which we did look into, and then the other item I totally forgot to bring up before I concluded the video. So I wanted to take a second look at the book of Prince Caspian, so I could cover that second item I mentioned, and then also there was a few other items I wanted to look at in the story as well. That I think I mentioned that in the video as well. So first, let's start off with the second item that I was going to cover last time, and that being the bears as the marshals of the list. In the story, when the duel is set between Peter and Miraz, and Caspian's army is preparing for the duel, they are in consultation as to whom should be the marshals of the list. You know, the people coming bearing the banner of the lion into the duel. And one of the bears comes forward and mentions that the bears have always held that distinction. So I want to read through that passage. It comes back and it brings back into play the concept of things that have been forgotten, or that maybe I should say have been remembered, that one would expect to be forgotten. Similar to Lily Gloves, you know, we've talked about how well over probably 600 years have passed, if not longer, and Lily Gloves, you know, and his descendants have faded into history. No one remembers them now, except Peter. You know, Peter did remember Lily Gloves because the passage of time for him was so much shorter, and it was a very special thing that Lily Gloves could be remembered after so many years of being forgotten to history. In this scene, there's something that has been remembered in history, and to Peter, it's surprising that it hasn't been forgotten. So we'll just take a look at that, starting off here. So it's later on in the book, as I mentioned. It's during the battle between the duo between Peter and Miraz. Suddenly a thick, sleepy voice said, "Your Majesty, please." Peter turned, and there stood the eldest of the bulgy bears. "If you please, Your Majesty," he said. "I'm a bear, I am." "To be sure, so you are. And a good bear, too, I don't doubt," said Peter. "Yes," said the bear, "but it was always the right of the bears to supply one of the marshals of the list." "Don't let him," whispered Trumpkin to Peter. "He is a good creature, but he'll shame us all. He'll go to sleep, and he will suck his paws, in front of the enemy, too." "I can't help that," said Peter, "because he's quite right. The bears always had that privilege. Can't imagine how it's been remembered all these years, when so many other things have been forgotten." "Please, Your Majesty," said the bear. "It is your right," said Peter, "and you shall be one of the marshals." So Peter, you know, similar in the scene, similar to Lily Gloves. It's only been a year for Peter that he's been has not been in the royalty of Narnia and exposed to those different types of duels and other elements that make up royalty. So Peter did not forget Lily Gloves. Similarly, he has not forgotten that the bears always had the right of being one of the marshals of the list. So while it's only been a year for Peter, for the bears in this scene, and maybe in Narnian history, it's probably been quite a while that they have not served in that capacity. Now that's inference. You know, we don't know how long the bears have been, or maybe all the animals have been not welcomed in to Narnian society, and so Narnian society. We know in other parts of the book that dwarves and other creatures, probably the talking animals, are at this point in Narnian history looked upon as probably mythical. That it's doubtful. A lot of the Telmarine people, of whom Caspian is a descendant, a lot of these people don't look upon the dwarves and the talking animals as even being, real, or even being reality. Well, we see some of that in the scenes between Caspian and Dr. Cornelius, for example. How long that's been the case, though, we don't know. Maybe at the time of Caspian the First, Second, Third, they were acknowledged. They were known to be real. But at what point they went into hiding, we don't know. So, possibly the bears had those types of positions as marshals of the list early on in the Caspian history. But I would imagine that since at this point they are thought to be mythical, that it's probably been quite a number of years, hundreds of years at least, that the bears would not have served in that capacity whatsoever. And so Peter finds it remarkable that the bears have not forgotten. I think it holds true to some of the other elements within the book, that the bears haven't forgotten, because another thing I wanted to take a look at in the video is the difference between the dwarves and the talking animals. How the dwarves, as we see in this book, we also see it in the last battle. I can remember specifically because there's significant scenes in the last battle in which the dwarves hold themselves apart. One of the sayings in the last battle is, the dwarves are for the dwarves, meaning that they choose to stand apart, maybe not technically calling themselves full Narnian, maybe not holding to what Aslan has created them to be, or even, as we see in the last battle, not even acknowledging that Aslan may be real. Whereas the animals in that book, they inherently know that Aslan is real. Aslan is a beast, is an animal just like they are. And I think that lends them some ability to hold on to that, the faith in Aslan, and that inherent belief that Aslan is true and real, and they're not going to be ones to hold themselves apart or aloof, but they're going to cling to that fact, and always cling to that fact, and always take pride and honor in the fact that they are an animal, they are a beast, just like Aslan is. Now in other books there are some wicked animals, like I think about the wolves, for example, in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Some of the wolves in that book have turned sides and have accepted the White Witch as the leader of Narnia. But in general, I think we see, for the most part throughout the series, we see the animals holding more true to what Aslan has created them to be. There's a passage I wanted to look at that brings to light a lot of these elements, I think, within the book. Within this passage, there's multiple different references that that kind of brings forth these ideas that I mentioned. And then I think as well that we see these elements within the characters of the first three people that Caspian meets when he flees from the castle of Miraz. He meets the badger and Trufflehunter. I had a blank on his name for a moment there. Trufflehunter, the badger, and then the two dwarves, Nikabrik and Trumpkin. We see Trufflehunter as being dedicated to multiple different factors. He is dedicated to Aslan first and foremost. He wholeheartedly believes in Aslan, even though Aslan has not revealed himself, that we can tell for hundreds of years in Narnian history. He still wholeheartedly believes that Aslan is real, and that he is the High King, of Narnia, the king above any human king that sits on the throne. But then also we see him being wholeheartedly devoted to Caspian and his rightful position as the human king upon the throne of Narnia. And then within that we see that Trufflehunter also accepts that Aslan has declared that a human being must be the rightful heir to the throne at all times. That is the distinction of humans within the Narnian history. Trufflehunter believes that. And then I think maybe last and foremost, he believes in who he is as a beast, who Aslan has created him to be. And in the passage that I'm going to read, we'll see some of that come out. That is to distinguish him from the other two characters that Caspian initially meets, Nikabrik and Trumpkin. Nikabrik being, I think, a key character that Lewis writes in to reflect the doubting and the dwarves, or for the dwarves mentality within the book. Nikabrik is the one who does not believe in Aslan. He does not believe, I think, in Caspian. I mean, I think he agrees, that he acknowledges that Caspian is the rightful heir to the throne. However, he leans more along the lines of, we want peace and security and safety in Narnia for the dwarves. I think he gets along okay with the talking beasts, but he's more focused upon what can the dwarves get out of it. How do we bring safety and security about for our people? He's much more selfish in that respect. He's not looking at it in terms of Narnia as a whole. He's obviously not looking at it in terms of Aslan as the leader of Narnia, or as Caspian, or in Caspian as king of Narnia. He's more focused on the dwarves. Trumpkin is not as bad. Trumpkin, I think, acknowledges that, yes, Caspian is the rightful heir. We want Narnia to be whole. We don't want the Telmarines to be ruling over us any longer. He's more willing to side with the beasts, and going up into any fights with Miraz. But unfortunately, at the same time, he does not believe in Aslan, and we'll see that in this passage as well. But I think it gives, those three characters give a good kind of a span of different beliefs, the different types of beliefs that we see within the characters and the creatures of Narnia. So let's look at that. Let's read through that now. And I think it was good that I walked through these the first three people that Caspian meet, because they are the ones that Caspian Caspian falls in with, and is taken in as trying to reascend to the throne, the ones that are helping him along. The passage is within the chapter called The People That Lived in Hiding, so right after Caspian meets up with Trufflehunter and Nikabrik and Trumpkin, they take him to the people that lived in hiding. And essentially those people are the talking beasts that everyone believe, or that the Telmarines believe are mythical, that have receded so far into the woods that no one has seen of them for decades, if not longer. So it happens, this is later on in the chapter after Caspian has first met some of the animals, and now he is being introduced to some of the dwarves. Let's see, let's start here. Two of the dwarves sat at the bellows. Another was holding a piece of red-hot metal on the anvil with a pair of tongs. A fourth was hammering on it. And two were wiping their horny little hands and greasy claws, coming forward to meet the visitors. It took some time to satisfy them that Caspian was a friend and not an enemy. But when they did, they all cried, "Long live the king!" And their gifts were noble: mail shirts and helmets and swords for Caspian and Trumpkin and Nikabrik. The badger could have had the same if he had liked, but he said he was a beast, he was, and if his claws and teeth could not keep his skin whole, it wasn't worth keeping. The workmanship of the arms was far finer than any that Caspian had ever seen, and he gladly accepted the dwarf-made sword instead of his own, which looked, in comparison, as feeble as a toy and clumsy as a stick. The 7 brothers, who were all red dwarves, promised to come to the feast at the dancing lawn. A little farther on, in a dry, rocky ravine, they reached the cave of the 5 black dwarves. They looked suspiciously at Caspian, but in the end, the eldest of them said, "If he is against Miraz, we'll have him for king." And the next oldest said, "Shall we go further up for you, up to the crags? There's an ogre or 2 and a hag that we can introduce you to up there." "Certainly not," said Caspian. "I should think not indeed," said Trufflehunter. "We want none of that sort on our side." Nikabrik disagreed with this, but Trumpkin and the Badger overruled him. It gave Caspian a shock to realize that horrible creatures out of the old stories, as well as the nice ones, had some descendants in Narnia still. "We should not have Aslan for a friend if we brought in that rabble," said Trufflehunter as he came away from the cave of the black dwarves. "Oh, Aslan," said Trumpkin, cheerily but contemptuously. "What matters much more is that you shouldn't have me." "Do you believe in Aslan?" asked Caspian to Nikabrik. "I'll believe in anyone or anything," said Nikabrik, "that'll batter these cursed Telmarine barbarians and drive them out of Narnia. Anyone or anything, Aslan or the White Witch, do you understand?" "Silence," said Trufflehunter. "You do not know what you're saying. She was a worse enemy than Miraz and all his race." "Not to us dwarves she wasn't," said Nikabrik. And I'll stop there. So there's multiple things as I was reading through that I could see that I was talking about just now. Starting with the dwarves, maybe we saw several things. So first of all, when they met the black dwarves, they said, "If he is against Miraz, we'll have him for king." So going back to what I mentioned, the dwarves looking out just for the dwarves, it kind of plays into what Nikabrik was saying, that we'll believe in anyone or anything, said Nikabrik, which would include the White Witch, being someone that can bring safety and peace to the dwarves. He mentions that the White Witch wasn't as cruel to the dwarves as Miraz was, and the Telmarines. I don't remember some of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, in which the White Witch plays the most prominent role. Some of that book I don't remember. I haven't read it in a while. But the one scene I can remember is the dwarf, being the one driving the sledge in which the White Witch moves about Narnia, during the 100 Years winter. So obviously there, she has employed one of the dwarves. That dwarf, willingly took her side, at least. So moving on from there, maybe to the attitude of Trumpkin, for example. So Trumpkin agreed in this case about the hags and the ogre, that they should not bring them into service. And that's one thing I noticed within the story, was that there's some elements of different characters and creatures in Narnia that are kind of inherently evil, that we don't know where they came from. Presumably Aslan did not create these creatures. Made me think of some, going back to the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The scene where Aslan is being killed by the White Witch, and she has that group of foul creatures with her, serving on her side. Who knows where these creatures came from? There's probably a lot of Narnian history that we don't know of. When Aslan created Narnia and the magician's nephew, these types of creatures are not talked about, and so we don't know where some of these creatures came from. Just likely a lot of the history is similar to what we see in this story, in which at the end of the book, Aslan is explaining that the Telmarines aren't actually native to Narnia. They came through in a doorway, from our world, and through a doorway on an island in our world. So similarly, maybe some of these wicked creatures that are inherently evil also came through doorways like that. Maybe the White Witch or other types of evil people, maybe Jadis, brought them forth or called them up, to be servants of the evil within Narnia. Nikabrik was willingly, and the Black Dwarves were willingly ready to call them to their side to help fight Telmarines. But Trumpkin and Trufflehunter disagreed with that. So it shows Trumpkin, having some confidence, having some good qualities within him to help him recognize that these are wicked beings. We don't want to have anything to do with them. But at the same time, he scoffed at Aslan, and there's other passages in the book where he talks about how he doesn't believe in Aslan. Aslan, I remember there's a passage that he talks about Aslan being, if Aslan's real and he's still around, he must be pretty old by now. And thinking of him in terms of just being a real beast, not being the eternal king of Narnia. And then there's Trufflehunter. I think the one passage I like in this, or the one sentence I like in this passage is his refusal to wear any dwarf-made mail or carry a sword or anything. He said he was a beast, he was, and if his claws and teeth could not keep his skin whole, it wasn't worth keeping. I think there's another passage. Let me look at that really quick if I can. If I see it here. Let's try this. I wrote a few of these things down on my paper. Let's see if it's in this passage or not. Peter turned and found himself face to face with the badger. He leaned forward and put his arms around the beast. He kissed his furry head. It wasn't a girlish thing for him to do because he was the High King. Best of badgers, he said, you never doubted us all through. No credit to me, your majesty, said Trufflehunter. I'm a beast. We don't change. I'm a badger once more, and we hold on. So I think I highlighted that because it just calls forth again Trufflehunter's character, his holding fast to being a beast, his connection with as a beast with the High King of all beasts, at being Aslan. He holds true to that. He holds fast to that, and I think for him to have done so after so long of a time of Aslan not showing himself on the Narnian scene, it speaks to probably his descendants, also holding true to that. That they have been able to retain that throughout history, retain the probably the inherent belief that they have. It's almost like an instinct that they have inside of them, that they are created especially by Aslan to be talking beasts. Aslan warns them, I think, somewhere, I don't remember where. Is it in The Magician's Nephew, I think, that if they forget who they are and they go back to living in wild animal ways, that they will cease being talking beasts. Aslan says that, and I think that it's probably something that as a talking beast you need to hold on to, like Trufflehunter said, we hold on. We hold on to what we believe and know in our hearts is true. That Aslan created us as special talking beasts, and we must hold on to that. We cannot allow ourselves to descend into doubt and selfishness, maybe, like we see in Nikabrik and other dwarves in the stories. There's another passage that also brings some of this to light. This is when the Pevensies start their trek with Trumpkin to go to meet Aslan's Caspian's army, and they come across a bear. So the bear comes upon them suddenly. It says Lucy was knocked down and heard the twang of a bowstring as she fell. When she was able to take notice of things again, she saw a great grim-looking gray bear lying dead with Trumpkin's arrow in its side. "The DLF beat you in that shooting match, Sue," said Peter. I left it too late," said Susan, in an embarrassed voice. "I was afraid it might be, one of our kind of bears, a talking bear." "That's the trouble of it," said Trumpkin. "When most of the beasts have gone enemy and gone dumb, there's still some of the other kind left. You never know, and you daren't wait to see." So, it's just a reference to what I was talking about, that some of the beasts have gone dumb. They have gone back to the old ways of being wild. And it probably comes about from having to spend so much time being in hiding. The next page over is an interesting reference. I'll read it. Susan and Lucy are talking, and one of them says, "Wouldn't it be dreadful if someday in our own world at home, men started going wild inside, just like the animals here, and still look like men, so that you never knew which were which?" I find it interesting, Yes, that's true now. We can tell that's true now in our world. To what degree Lucy says that, it's hard to picture, or it's hard to kind of get an idea of. There's people out there who probably are inherently wicked, like those ogres or hags. Okay, let me not say that. They're not inherently wicked, but they've given themselves over to wickedness for so long and so readily that they're more inclined to wickedness than otherwise. But then maybe there's also the degree of looking at things from a more metaphysical point of view, that at some point people can give themselves over to what we know as being things that are inherently evil. There are things that are inherently evil in this world too, just like hags and ogres are inherently evil in Narnia. There are inherently evil things here in our world, and people can give themselves over to those things, and unfortunately, and have those things indwell them and become wild people at that point. So as I was talking through it, I kind of pieced it together in my mind more than when I was actually thinking about it. It's a good. The passages we looked at are good examples of how those different characters play out within. I think not only within Prince Caspian, but within the series as a whole. As I mentioned, I can think of other books. We brought up The Last Battle and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and The Magician's Nephew. And we brought up elements within each one of those books of where we can see how the beasts of Narnia are more to be relied upon. You can, when you think of a true Narnian, you can think of the beasts, the talking beasts that as in created as being the true Narnians, whereas the dwarves are more not quite so sure about them. We saw that in this book. We saw that in The Last Battle. And that's not to say some of the beasts don't turn sides. They do, but overall, I think that they're more. They hold fast to more of what Aslan called them to be. Thank you for watching.